enable.
Brought to you by KPMG.
Hello and welcome to the show. Now, KPMG presents 25 years of making a difference, and today we are discussing Consumer Insights 2019 here at CNBC TV 18. Let me first introduce our panel of experts on this. Amit Sharma, the co-founder and CEO of ShopX, Rohit Malkani, who's the VP Marketing at Crompton Greaves, A.D. Singh, Managing Director at Olive Bar and Kitchen, and Harshraz Dan, the Partner and Head Consumer Markets at KPMG in India. Gentlemen, welcome to this discussion. Now, to begin with, as consumption story is really robust in India, now the companies are getting more innovative and scientific in their approach to connect as well as cater to the consumers' needs. Technology disruption has played a very big role in this, and especially data, which is a big buzzword now. So while data is the new fuel of new age, it is also true that like crude oil, it is a useless thick goop unless refined into fuel, is what I have to say. And that's where all the experts really come in refining the data. Let me start with you then. What do you think about the way we have evolved in data mining and the kind of impact that we expect on the consumers?
Sure, Nisha. I think, it's been said that data is the new oil, and I agree with you. I don't think that's entirely true. I think data is its own form of commodity, and clearly it's very important. I think it's the new platform on which the new economy is being built. Right. And everything from deciding what kind of brands to build, a phenomenon we call brandization, which is very relevant for India, to what kind of customers to target, to how to target them, how do you provide them relevant and limited set of options in an age where probably all of us suffer from too many options. Right. The targeting part, right down to extending credit, for example, to businesses and consumers. It's all being powered by data today.
All right, powered by data, but I would also say that probably the consumer insights are also very inexplicably related to the culture as well as the lifestyle of these consumers. Now, KPMG has authored a report, Me, My Life, My Wallet, on consumer insights. So, Harsh, take us through the basic highlights on what are the basic tenets on which you define the insights and act upon them.
Yeah, so I think today's consumer is complex. Tomorrow's consumer is not going to become any easier for us to manage. And that was the basic premise when we began to work on this report globally. We worked on this report across 8 countries, 25,000 plus consumers. And the intent was to understand how and what consumers seek from companies when you market to them. And it's talked about data management, how the consumers would try and share data. I think some of the interesting insights which came around was that 87% of Indian consumers were willing to share their personal data for some kind of discount or some kind of improvement in customer experience. Very different from most other countries in Europe, Latin America and the US. The only country which came close to that was China, at around 89%. When we digged a little deeper, it was even more insightful because we wanted to look into social media. Right. And we tried to ask people that if there's a flash or a discount offered on your social media, how many of you, what percentage of you would actually jump at it? India stacked very high at about 58%. And then we looked at Europe, they were not even 20 or 30% of the number. So I then come back to your point around data. I think Indian consumers are still evolving. They love to engage, they seek value, but I think it's up to corporates to try and engage and understand how they can deal with this data and build trust in a way in which the consumer can hang on to them.
All right, building trust is very important. AD, you'll come in here. Food and beverages is such a market where trust is clearly very important. How have you seen the consumer connect really evolve for your kind of a business?
Yes, you're right. I think our business is very much driven by word of mouth. We all go to restaurants. If a friend recommends it, that's the best recommendation. So trust and, personal connect is critical. When I started, that was actually the first thing that I put out to our first teams itself. We opened our first Olive now 18 years ago in Bandra. At that time, the culture was, they're a little mistrustful of the consumer. Are they trying to cheat me?
Right.
Will they say ki 500 diya jab sirf 100 rupaye ka diya? So our thing was, we are in business because of the consumer. We must trust them and look after them. And I think that made a very big difference to the consumers at that time. And it's one of the things the company has stood for. And I think that's helped our main brand, Olive, and also many of the new brands that have evolved over that period.
All right. And Rohit, what has been your experience? How have corporates like yourself really evolved? You worked in Asian Paints for so long and now Crompton Greaves Consumer. So how do you think the overall mindset for the corporates in India has evolved with the technological shift that we have seen?
So I think a couple of things, the way data has evolved, right? I think in the last few years, what we've seen is, I think the penetration of smartphones has led to a proliferation of the Indic keyboard, right? Which means that earlier all the data you had was in English, and whatever kind of text analytics you wanted to do on that was all in English. Now what's happened is that there's so much content that's flowing around, consumer conversations and all of that that's happening actually in all the languages, right? So deciphering that is a big one, because, so if you ask me, the big trend that we're likely to see over a period of time is, I say it's going to move from, the World Wide Web, WWW, to WWV, which is works with voice, because voice conveys so much more emotion.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to analyze some text that I put down versus analyzing voice, and that's going to be a big thing that is going to impact a lot of our lives, especially with so many voice assistants coming into the picture. So if you're looking at insights from consumers, that's going to be a huge, rich source, given that, like Harsh said, our consumers are going to get even more complicated. Okay, we're looking at micro segments. Some people call them cohorts. You call them what you may, but, consumers are not, there's no herd mentality anymore. Right? So you can't have a one-size-fits-all. You can't have, hey, I've got this great big idea, and I'm going to go to the market, and this is going to fetch me 1,000 crores, right? That no longer exists in the bricks and mortar world anymore, right? It's a bunch of small ideas that are going to work with, something for Amit, something for Harsh, something for Nisha, something for AD, something else for, your spouse, your partners, and so on and so forth. And that's what the world is evolving to, because everyone wants to express themselves differently.
Yeah. So Rohit, you harped on voice as a new technology and new age, tool to be used a lot. You emphasized on that. Amit, you want to reflect more on that?
Yeah, I think, the challenge for corporates is often that consumers need simplicity, clearly, in today's world more than any other time. But, there is complexity behind the scene when you run a restaurant, when you run a complicated enterprise. And I think the trick is in how do you use technology to simplify things for the consumer, right? And, we speak about voice, but just to back off a little bit, I think, one of the things we have found in ShopX is, for example, we localize intensely. And we end up with 27 million subsegments, right? This is a real number. Like if you see the number of languages that we cater to, the number of regions, and if you go to two retailers who we cater to in streets that are maybe 10 meters apart, they get a completely different view of the merchandise with different pricing.
Right.
Because guess what, tastes do change in India, not from state to state, but from street to street. Right? And I think therefore technology and automation becomes an imperative to provide a simplified view. Specifically about voice, I think it's very true. I think that the modern consumer is trying to find new ways of engaging with technology. Smartphone is a piece of technology that every Indian has now, but they don't talk to them, they don't interact with the smartphone the way it was even meant to or conceived of. Right? Like the phone from the time of the iPhone was meant to be a calling device.
Yes.
And if you go back to, let's say, early 2000s, or most of our time on a phone would be used for calling.
Yes.
Today, if you do an audit of your time, maybe like 10% of your time on the phone is used for calling. Whether you're WhatsApping, Facebooking, Googling, whatever, right?
Yes.
And so I think the use of these technology platforms and devices has been reimagined by the consumer. We see a lot of voice use. Our search is powered by voice more than text, as people find it easy. So I think the trick for corporates is to use technology to give a simplified view to consumers, and that's hard, it's complicated.
KPMG presents 25 years of making a difference.
So, Harsh, you have also harped on the complication bit, but are we evolving in terms of our tailor-made technology and processes for an Indian audience, which is so diverse and complex?
I think we're evolving very fast, and we've seen beautiful examples from people here. One of the survey questions we had was, if you're a consumer, would you rather lose your wallet or your phone? Okay, so it's
wallet on the phone.
Wallet or the phone, yeah. And 55% of Indian consumers said, I'll let the wallet go. And then we said, maybe we're a little different from other parts of the world, and we've always seen a difference between Europe and America and India.
Yes.
And there's no difference.
Yes.
So coming back, I think everyone here says, are consumers catching up or has caught up with most of the markets in terms of technology, digital media, phones, and possibly on voice?
Yeah.
And I guess we'll have to keep keeping it simple, as I think AD mentioned it. Keep the insight simple, customize your offering quickly, and sort of learn from mistakes you've made. Because you will continue to make mistakes as the consumer evolves, but the beauty is in terms of understanding where you're making a mistake and correcting it, because no one is going to be perfect in this world right now.
Right, but what about our villages? Like if the consumer companies, they want to reach out, have they changed their mechanism of approaching? Of course, phone penetration has really been widespread, but there's a lot more to be done. Data is also cheaply available, but not as cheap to really reach the villages and to the ground zero as well. So how do you see this evolve? Is there a lot yet to be done, or we still are going with the traditional mindset on reaching out to the consumers?
I think from a point of consumers in rural villages, I think the government has put a lot of effort in terms of electrification of villages.
Right.
Yeah, and data costs have come down rapidly over the last 2 years. Imagine a village, he or she did not have access to even electricity. How is he even going to think of charging his phone, leave alone even trying to see any kind of media advertisements going on?
Exactly.
It opens up a fully new market, and I guess we'll have to think through what we offer to those consumers. Maybe our price points are invalid. Maybe our approaches are also invalid. Maybe sort of Shop exchanges its thing for India 3 or whatever when you get in there. So I guess that's going to be the key thing. So they are changing, but there's lots more to be done, because I think it's a huge task ahead of us. But I think that's again the beauty. Keep it simple. Try and get to those people. There's a huge opportunity opening for all of us as corporates for these markets.
Oh, of course, because that's still a volume play, and I would say that data and technology is still used more for the margin play as well, at least at this point, and there's a lot more to be done. But AD, coming to you, how do you ascertain that this is the kind of a brand and a store and food outlet that I'm going to open in a particular part of the city? I mean, what is the kind of process that goes behind understanding the mindset of the consumers there?
See, I started off in this business almost 30 years ago. So firstly, is a lot of intuitiveness, because we are in still limited number of markets. Our company is only in 10 cities. Those are all cities that I've spent a reasonable amount of time with. And the 1 or 2 cities which I don't know myself, we've been lucky to have a good local partner who really understands it. So that helps us understand location, value of that, how does it work, what kind of customer is a certain brand targeting. Now, because the market has grown so much and there's so much competition, we've now started hiring research agencies. So now we research every location and see what kind of spends are there, office goers, residences, destination, etc. By and large, as a company, we're putting all our brands into places with already high footfall. Whereas the Olives, of course, became famous as being popular destinations. But now with all our casual dining brands, we are putting them where there's high footfall.
All right, so that's that, AD, but I'm sure in your business and even in Rohit's business, the consumers still react very positively to discounts, promotions, and that's a no-brainer since old times, right? Is that like the easiest way to get the response, get the sales up, and is there a new way evolving for this particular trend as well?
So I'd say that is still something that is very slowly moving towards where people are looking for the right value. If I were to put it that way, because see, in any industry where you have a lot of competition,
yes,
right, the easiest in is to cut price.
Yes,
right. But I think it will always be a test of time how you're able to sort of slowly get get the right value for the consumer and get them to start paying that premium. But yes, you're right. When it comes to whatever you would call let's say products that you have at the bottom of the pyramid, there's always an intense price war there.
All right. While we're wrapping up, Amit, just wanted to understand that, age-old brands like something like a Colgate. So if you wanted toothpaste, it was Colgate. When you wanted to go for a copier, it was Xerox and Usha machine. So all these really did some good work to connect with the consumers. What is it that technology is really bringing in new that these guys already didn't do?
See, I think one thing which is true is that, the world is changing faster than ever. I think the pace of innovation has dramatically increased, whether we realize. I mean, talking about consumer goods, right? We work with every major and a bunch of small and medium-sized consumer brands. And you gave the example of Colgate, but you had Patanjali come from right of field and take everybody by surprise, and that made a dent in the toothpaste industry. Right, and we'll see how long-lasting that is. But I think the emergence of new brands, the democratization of distribution channels, the ability to reach out to consumers using digital media has just allowed, I think, people to innovate at a pace that we haven't seen earlier. And I think the role of technology is basically I think on both parts, both the incumbents, they have to ask, how do I protect my turf and innovate faster with technology? But also the challengers, and how do I break the bastions and carve out a niche for myself. So I think in both places it's really, really critical.
I think retailers understood that omni-channel approach, not just in selling, but even to reach out and in advertisements is also the key. You have to catch the customer wherever he is taking the feed. So I think that was very well established from what earlier Kishore Biani used to say and what Walmart and Flipkart landed up doing. But Harsh, closing remarks. While data is becoming so big, how are you seeing consumer, demands evolving, and about data security? Is there still a lot of discomfort around this subject?
So I think I won't call it discomfort. I think the Indian consumer doesn't realize what his data can do for him. So he's happy to share it, but he or she doesn't know what it means when it's being shared. So he shares it equally with AD's team, with Rohit, but any other vendor in the market. And I think that's why it's critical for large corporates such as us to understand that when we engage with the consumer, you engage in a manner in which it builds trust, build equity, and then you have a mutually successful relationship between both sides. In essence, I would say you have to make every engagement with your consumer count. If you don't do it, sometime or the other, it's going to hit you and hit you really hard.
All right, thanks so much for that, Harsh, Amit, as well as Rohit, AD, all of you for joining us here on CNBC TV 18 and adding so much value to this discussion on consumer insights for the year 2019. There's just so much happening. The world is changing very fast and technology is evolving, also having a huge impact. So we'll keep all of you well abreast with all the technological changes and the new evolutions. With that, it's a wrap on this show. Please do stay connected with CNBC TV 18.
Brought to you by KPMG.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.